Hey, my name is Victor Stepanoff. I'll be guiding you through this beginner Blender Python tutorial. Today, we're going to be creating this scene right here. We're going to be using only a Python script to create this. We're going to be using some variables, a for loop, and at the end of the tutorial, I'll introduce a new type of for loop called the while loop. So stick around for that. If you have never worked with for loops in Python, don't worry, I have a video going over the basics of Python for loops, so I would recommend to check that out before you dive into this particular video. And if you have watched my other Blender Python tutorials and you want an extra challenge, I challenge you to create this particular scene without watching this video, and then coming back after you're done, or getting to a place where you're feeling that you're stuck, and then with those questions, come back to this video and see how I would have done it. This will help you solidify all the knowledge you've gained. And without further ado, let's get into the tutorial. All right, I have Blender open here and I want to navigate and open the scripting workspace. So it's up here. And as soon as I do that, I'll just hit new right here to create a new script. The very first thing that we need to figure out with the scene is what are the basic building blocks here. And actually there's only one. It's this cuboid right here, or like a brick mesh. And you can see that it's getting rotated about the z-axis, and that's pretty much it. So let's start with creating this basic building block through a Python script. With that in mind, what are the steps that we need to take to create that basic building block? I'll write down the steps that I'm thinking of right now in Python comments. Add the comments right here, and here are my comments. I'm going to be using a cube mesh to create this building block. The obvious things to do is we're going to be scaling that cube and applying the scale. The less obvious, if you haven't done a lot of Python programming, is that you need to import some functionality so Python has access to Blender's functionality, and also get a reference to an object that you've created. We need some kind of reference to a given mesh so we can manipulate that in our code. So let's start going through these comments one by line. By the way, a comment in Python is represented with a hash character. This means that Python will ignore anything you write after the hash character. This is really useful to make some human readable comments for you in the future, or maybe for someone else who's reading your script. Most of your Blender Python scripts are going to be starting out with importing BPY. BPY is a module that gives Python access to Blender, so think of it as Blender needs add-ons to extend Blender's functionality, right? Similar with modules in Python, you're extending the functionality of Python. So there's some basic functionality Python has already, and then you have these modules that extend Python's abilities. That's going to be our first line of code. The very next thing that we need to do is we need to add the cube mesh. And I'm going to just head on over into the 3D viewport right here. And actually, let me clear the scene by hitting AX and then delete to just clear the scene. And I'm just going to hit Shift A on my keyboard and then select a cube. And in the scripting workspace, we have this info panel down below right here that gives us some commands that we can just copy and paste. And that's what I'll do right now. I'll just copy this and paste it right here. This right here is the primary command that we'll be using. It has a lot of other arguments that it's passing in, so some kind of parameters that control the end result of running this command or this function. We will be using the default values of these parameters, so I'm just going to select everything and then delete it. And let's just delete everything from the scene by hitting AX and then delete, and then just run the script. So right now, this should just start adding a cube into the center of the scene. I run the script and the cube appears, right? I can move the cube somewhere right here by hitting G and just moving it around. And then let's run it again, and you can see that we're continuing to add a cube into the scene. All right, to start manipulating and scaling down our cube, we need to get a reference to that cube through the Python code. And to do that, we'll be using this particular line right here. This gains access to the currently active object, and as soon as we add any object into Blender, that becomes the currently active object, and that's what we're retrieving right here and saving it into this particular variable. So this is now a reference to our cube. And if I run the script right now, nothing will change because this is just getting a variable. It's not doing anything to the scene itself. Now let's scale down the mesh to make that particular building block form that we saw just in the beginning of the tutorial. Let's add another cube into the scene, and let's scale it by updating this transform. So I'm going to scroll down right here, and let's just update, let's say X right here. And as soon as I let go of that, I get this particular command down here, and I just can copy it and add it into our script. In reality, this particular thing is the same thing as our currently active object, so I can just replace this right here. And the scale is represented by 3 values on the X, Y, and Z. And this is a way to access the very first value, which is X. And we can replace this with reference to just an X. And now we can run our code. I'm going to hide this. And you can see, like, without this, I'm going to comment this out, delete everything. Let's move this to the side. And let's rerun our script. And you can see nothing is getting changed, right? I have commented this code out. This is not getting executed. Let's update that. And you can see that we're updating our mesh right here. And let me update the scale on the Y and Z axis as well. I'm using this multiplication right here to make sure that the object scales relatively to its actual size. And let's see how this looks on screen. So I'm going to delete that, run it. And this is our particular building block. Note that this particular syntax can be improved, and I can just do this. So this won't change a thing. This right here is a short way to write the same code. I'll just show you this right now. I'm going to keep the old way to make it a bit more readable, but know that this will result in the same mesh transformation. As you can see, it's doing the same thing to the mesh. But I'm going to undo that to make sure that this is a bit more readable. Okay, after updating the scale of our object, let's apply the scale. So right now we have this right here. And to apply the scale by hand, you would hover over the 3D viewport, select the object, and hit Control A, and then select Apply Scale. And as soon as you do that, you can see that the scale returned to 111. And in the info panel down below, you can see the code that actually applies that. So let's copy that and paste it right here. And we can actually see the documentation for this particular command in the interactive Python console that's just above the info panel. I'm going to just paste that and hit Tab to get the documentation. And you can see the parameters that this particular command or this particular function has. And it also applies, by default, it also applies the location, the rotation, and other properties. And for this particular scene, I think the default for me is fine. So instead of using the provided parameters by the info panel, so this is what the info panel gave us, right? We were only applying the scale. So only the scale is true. The scale parameter is true. I'm just going to use the default just to make it a bit more compact. All right, let's now run our script. Let's delete that. And again, let's run this before and after the change. So I'm commenting out this code is not running, and we have the scale like so. Let's delete that. Let's uncomment this and then run it. And now you can see the scale is just set to 1. Okay, now with our building block ready, we need to figure out how to create this rotation. So we're going to be stacking our building blocks and rotating slightly as we go up the axis. Think about how you would do this by hand, and you can write the instructions for this in the comments. I'll write mine as well, and here are my instructions, and I've written them again in comments, right? This is not readable by Python. The very first thing is that I'm going to be creating some variables to keep track of the current rotation. Then I'm going to be doing the stacking in the rotation. So this is going to be our for loop. Instead of creating a mesh again and again by running this code, I'm just going to use the duplicate mesh functionality which Blender has. Then after doing the duplication, I'm going to get a new reference for the object we duplicated. We're going to update the location on the z-axis, and then we're going to update the rotation. And at the very end, we're going to update the current angle, right? Every single iteration of this for loop, we're going to have a new angle that we're going to be applying right here. Okay, let's start filling out this code. For the variables, we're going to be using these three variables. For the first variable, we're going to be tracking the current angle, right? So this is going to be getting applied right here. So we're applying the rotation to our mesh. The angle step, as I mentioned, on each iteration of our for loop, we're going to be updating the current angle with this step. So it's that 3 degrees. And this count, I'm just going to be using as the number of times we're going to repeat this loop. The for loop is going to look like this, right? We're using the for keyword. We're going to have this I variable. I believe we don't really need this, but I'll just write this in the classical way you would write a for loop. And then we're going to use the range and use this particular count that we've created right here. Let's now duplicate our mesh. I'm going to hit Control Space to get a closer look at our mesh. And then I'm going to select it and then hit the right mouse button to get the context menu. And I'll be using a duplicate linked. I'll hit that, move this right here. And as you notice, there's another one, duplicate objects. The main difference between these is that the duplicate linked, it actually references the same data as this particular object, but the duplicate object actually creates a new set of data. So for example, if I update this mesh, then the linked one will only change. As you can see, I'm updating the data of the original mesh, and only that the linked one will actually update. So we need that in particular. So let's go back and let's find that duplicate linked again. And here it is in the info panel. There's actually a lot of stuff right here. I'm just going to copy that, and I'm just going to remove all these parameters that have been set here. And I actually know that there's a simpler function. So this one duplicates and moves the object that we're working with, but I just want to duplicate it. So there's just a duplicate. So as you can see, this is named duplicate move linked. And I know that Blender has just a duplicate function. And I'm going to hit tab, and here it is. So it duplicates the select object. And right here, linked by default, it's false. I'm going to update that and set that to true. And let's run our code. So let's do that. Delete everything. Okay, we ran our code. Seems that nothing really changed, but if we look into the outliner, we have a bunch of cubes right here. Probably should rename this. I'm not going to do that right now. So you can see that I'm just selecting these and hitting G to move them around. You can see that the building blocks were created. Now we just need to stack them and rotate them. And to get the currently active object, I'm just going to copy this code right here. It's going to create a new variable. Again, we can reuse variables, right? It's going to be now pointing to this duplicated object. As soon as we start reusing this variable, we're going to lose the reference to the original mesh. And that's okay for now. We don't really care about that mesh after we've created it. Now let's run our code and let's update the transform on the Z. So I'll just do it by hand and then copy the code in the info panel down below. So this is the code. And I'm just going to paste it right here. And again, this particular part is the same thing as our currently active, is the same thing as our reference right here. So I can replace that. The location, again, is a list of 3 values, so x, y, and z. It starts with 0 pointing to x and 2 is pointing to z. And I know that this is a vector, and I can just use this notation right here. This is a lot more readable. And now I need to figure out what is the right value right here. I can just maybe set it to 0.3 and then do the addition right here like so. So again, this is the same thing as writing this, right? And let me use this shorter notation right here. All right, I think that looks good. Let's delete everything and let's run our script. And you can see that, okay, we're getting somewhere. We're starting to stack our building blocks, but we can do a lot better right here. Instead of guessing that value that we need to add, I actually want them to be right on top of each other. And I know that our object, along with the location and the scale, it also has dimensions. This right here gives us access to the dimensions, and I want the dimensions on the z axis. So let's run that again. And now you can see the meshes are sitting right on top of each other, exactly what we wanted. And now let's start updating the rotation. Again, I'm going to go into the transform here and rotated that object on the z. So about the z right here. And again, we can look into the info panel down below and just copy that code, update it. And as you've seen me mention again, this is exactly the same object, a lot shorter way to reference that. Again, this is a vector. We're going to be accessing z. And you might say that, hey, wait a minute, this is not the 16 degrees. And yes, you're right, this is actually a radians, and Blender requires us to use radians when we're setting the rotation. An easy way to convert from degrees to radians is by using a special module called math. And I'm going to go up here at the top of our script, and I'll import math. So that particular module, right, it extends Python's functionality when dealing with math. So now I can write this. So in the math module, we have this function called radians. It converts from degrees into radians, and it sets it right here. So it's going to set the rotation for all of our duplicated meshes to 45 degrees. Let's go ahead and run that. And you can see that this is set to 45. All right. And instead of this 45, we want to use the current angle. So I'll just replace that 45 with the current angle with that variable. I'm going to delete everything. I'm going to run it. Nothing will change, right? And we're not updating the current angle on each iteration. And we're actually going to do this right here. And we're going to update it with the step that we defined above. So again, to the current angle, we're adding, to calculate the next value of the current angle, we're taking the current angle and adding this step, right? All right, let's run that. All right, look at that. We're getting some rotation and we're stacking. All right. Okay, now that we have this basic setup right here, if you remember at the beginning of the video, I showed you that we're going to be doing a 360 rotation with our mesh. And the challenge right here for you is, what change do we need to make to this particular code to make sure to get the same result as you saw in the beginning? And to get the same result, we need to just update the count right here. And that count needs to be calculated by using 360 that we want to rotate this by. So it's going to be 360 and then divided by the angle step. But the problem here is that this will return a number that has a decimal point, and the range doesn't accept decimal point numbers, and we need to convert that into an integer, so a number without a decimal point, and that's the way to do that conversion. Now let's run this code and look at that. But there's actually a bug in this code. If we take a look from the top at our scene, then we can see that this is not actually a full 360. It has a slight angle right here. And if we look at the transform, the very last mesh that we have here is rotated 357 degrees, not 360 degrees, right? So this is slightly off. And your challenge here is, what are we doing wrong in this code? So this code is almost working for most of the values, right? But then it's slightly off. And to figure this out, you can go about it a number of different ways. We can actually figure this out visually. And I'm just gonna comment this code right here and then set this to, let's say 2. And let's delete everything and run our script. Now let's zoom in into our very first few meshes right here, and you can see that there's clearly an issue right here that we're not really updating the rotation on the second mesh. And why is that? Well, if we go through the code and we see that we're creating our mesh, right? We're scaling it, applying the transform, then we're creating some variables, right? And the very first thing that we do is that we duplicate our mesh. So it's exactly the same thing. We get the reference, and then we just update the mesh on the z-axis. And then we apply the rotation here and set it to the current angle. But when does this current angle change? It actually changes only right here. So the very first time we go through this loop, current angle is set to 0, right? So this is clearly an issue, and it doesn't update our rotation of our mesh. And there's two ways to fix this. We could either move this update before we set the rotation, or maybe we can just move this around like so. So when we first use this current angle right here, we've already updated with the angle step. So now we've updated that. Let's rerun our script. And you can see now this is behaving in the way that we want it to. Okay, we can now update this and remove that. Let's rerun our script. And let's zoom into the very top. And look at that, the very last mesh is rotated 360. And you can see that in the transform panel right here. And if you're enjoying this tutorial, make sure to give this video a like so I can understand to create more videos like this. Okay, and as promised, let's take a look at the while loop. So we're going to update this code to use that while loop instead of this for loop right here. And the main idea of the while loop is similar to an if statement. If you don't know what an if statement is, I've made a separate video on that, so check that out if you're interested. The basic idea of an if statement is a piece of code only gets executed if a particular expression, a Boolean expression, is true. For example, if we're looping through all the objects in our scene and we want to only work on objects with the name cube, then we can create a special if statement that would work only on cubes by checking that the name of the object has cube in it. A similar thing happens when we use the while loop. So the while loop will repeat code over and over again until the Boolean expression that it has is false. So we can replace this for loop right here with a while loop. So we'll use the while keyword, and then we're going to be checking that the current angle is less than or equal to 360, right? So inside of this while loop, we're going to be continuing to update the current angle, and we will only stop when this right here, this Boolean expression is false. And we can actually remove this part right here. We don't need that count. And let's run our script. And you can see it results again in the same scene, but now using this particular while loop. I'll be providing a link to this final code in the description. So I highly recommend, if you haven't typed this already on your own, to get that code and at least play around with some of these variables and see what scenes you can get. And for more tutorials like this, make sure to subscribe and check out my Beginner Blender Python Tutorials playlist. Thank you so much for watching.